Hello everybody, welcome to the TTVJ YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about an integrated amp that we carry, the Advanced Paris A12. Advanced Paris builds some beautiful products, and the A12 amplifier is no exception. To look at it is to realize that it really truly is a work of art. The company began in 1995 and was started by audiophiles and was officially named Advanced Acoustics. Starting out as a speaker company, they expanded into electronics for audiophile listeners. Their first designs began in 2002, and by 2004 they had their first electronic component ready for consumers, and that was an integrated amplifier. Not this one, but it was an integrated amp is where they started. The first product under Advanced Paris name was released in 2013. Advanced Paris is located just outside of Paris. Gee, wonder how they got their name. And they're committed to high-quality audiophile components at relatively affordable prices. Today we'll be looking at their A12 integrated amplifier, and what a beauty it is. The A12 is a very versatile integrated amplifier with tons of connectivity. It has a DAC, a Phono stage, it has a headphone section, all included, as well as Bluetooth connectivity by adding the Advanced Paris XFTB02 module, which sells for $199. It is a dual mono amp design with a hybrid tube preamp and solid-state amplifier section. The preamp section features two ECC81, also known as 12AT7 tubes, for a warm and smooth sound. This is accomplished without diminishing the dynamics of the music, and we'll get into how it sounds here in a little bit. The power amp section boasts 190 watts per channel into 8 ohms and 280 watts into 4 ohms. There's no shortage of power with the A12 or headroom when you're listening to it. It controlled by Dynaudio Evoke 50 speakers with ease. These speakers rate at 87 dB efficiency and a 4 ohm impedance. I found this to be a great combo. The synergy was fantastic. The front panel of the A12 is eye-catching with 2 VU meters and the warm glow of two 12AT7 tubes. It looks beautiful and sophisticated. At the bottom left of the front panel resides a standby on-off switch. To the right of the power switch is the source input display. Next to the display is the analog source selector. You can choose from Phono, CD, auxiliary 1, 2, 3, and 4, as well as XLR 1 and 2. Two protection LEDs sit up and to the right. This allows you to see if the amp is operating correctly. If the LED remains on, you have a problem. In between these two LEDs is the high bias LED, which is lit when the high bias mode is on. There's a switch on the back, which we'll talk about in a little bit. When the high bias mode is on, the first couple watts really give it a Class A sound. Under these LEDs sits the multifunction button, which allows for amp configuration as well as the volume control. This is also where the treble and bass setting can be adjusted. Next to the right is the bidirectional knob, digital source selector, where the digital sources are chosen. HDMI, AES, EBU, Bluetooth for use when you add on the XFTB02, Optical 1, Optical 2, Optical 3, as well as Coax 1, 2, and 3. USB audio, USB-A, and HDMI connections are all chosen with this selector. The digital selection display is to the right of the selector button. Last on the front panel are the headphone outputs. Both quarter-inch stereo and stereo mini connections are supplied. What a beautiful front panel. The rear panel is loaded with connection options. Top left is the on-off switch, and the power cable plug-in is located just below it. The voltage input selector is below that. If you buy it from us, it'll already come pre-selected to 115 volts, but you can, if you live here and you decide you're going somewhere else, you can change the input selection for the voltage. Two sets of speaker terminals are located on the rear, allowing for 2 zones. Speakers should be 4 ohms or greater for this integrated amplifier. Across the top, in the middle of the unit, are the digital inputs and outputs with the HDMI in to connect your audio HDMI source, and the HDMI ARC to connect your TV to the A12. Below is the trigger out, USB input to keep the unit updated with current software, and then USB-A and USB-B computer connections. Next to the right are 3 coax and 3 optical inputs, as well as a place to plug in the XFT BO2 Bluetooth receiver. The last digital input is the AES EBU input. Below the digital inputs reside the XLR preamp output if you want to connect a separate power amplifier, and the XLR1 and XLR2 audio inputs. On the bottom are 2 sub outputs, the RCA and RCA inputs. On the bottom are 2 sub outputs and RCA inputs. Left to right on the bottom is amp input, and then a tape in and out, also known as a tape loop, which is a pretty rare connection on any stereo equipment these days. 4 RCA auxiliary inputs and a CD input, as well as an MMMC phono input and ground connection utilizing the fine phono stage built into the A12. Last on the right are the headphone selections for impedance and gain, allowing a large variety of headphones to be used. We found this pretty useful. We have kind of a pretty wide variety of headphones that we plugged in, anywhere from 30-some ohm Grado headphones on up to the Mez Elite, a couple other headphones. We have covered the front and rear panels. Now let's look at the specifications. As we've already said, this is one powerful Class AB amplifier with 190 watts in the 8 ohms and 280 watts in the 4 ohms. When in high bias mode, the amp will have the sound signature of a Class A amp for the first few watts. Bandwidth measures 10 to 35 kilohertz with a -3 dB variation and distortion at a low 0.007%. Signal to noise ratio is 103 dB with channel separation of greater than 75 dB. The DAC section uses a PCM 1796 DAC chip. The whole experience of listening to the A12 from the first time I fired it up until now has been nothing short of fantastic, especially for the money. When you power it on, it takes 30 seconds or so for it to warm up and engage. Then it's ready to play. I use the remote with the unit in standby mode to start up the A12. The remote is easy to use and cleverly designed. It's a little light to the feel, but it works perfectly. It kind of fingerprints easily and all that kind of stuff too, but it's a very usable remote, and it won't strain anything picking it up. I started using a CD player to break in the A12. Even early on, the amp sounded great. It was never harsh, but it was dynamic and punchy with a hint of warmth. It was neutral, not favoring any frequency range. Though punchy, it was smooth, never edgy, but full of energy. Most noticeable with the Dynaudio speakers was the deep, tight, punchy bass. It was toe-tapping bass, toe-tapping music, the kind of a lot of systems seem to lack these days. I found it very satisfying, and I am far from a bass head, but this was just fun to listen to, and the bottom end was very good. The definition of the drums and the bass guitar were all anyone could ask for. Again, more than you would expect at this price point. The mid-range also stood out as sweet, smooth, and detailed. I cannot overstate the detail of the mid-range. Vocals soared, guitars jangled. The production was faithful and enjoyable. It sounds like a much more expensive amp. The highs were smooth and non-fatiguing, with no glare or edginess. Clarity was very good. Definition was very good, and on the smooth side, making it a very pleasant listen. It had awesome resolution. The A12 has a nice large soundstage and imaged very well. I feel it does it better than anything else in this price range that I have heard. The amp is good for both critical and casual listening. It is engaging, fun, but also a serious tool for evaluating equipment. I found myself being excited to sit down and listen to music with the A12. I spent a considerable amount of time testing out the DAC in the A12. I used a TX701T transport for my digital source connected via an optical cable. I was pleasantly surprised by how good it sounded. I'm used to listening to some very high DACs and was holding my breath when I started listening. It didn't take long for me to appreciate how good the DAC was and deciding that I could actually live with that DAC in my digital sources. So another big plus for the A12. Resolution was very good, but not quite as good as a high-end separate. The resolution was just a little bit less, but it was still very good. I then switched gear and tried the Soundstage provided. I used a TAC TN5B turntable with the Shelter 501 Mark III Phono cartridge. Again, I found it to be a very satisfying musical experience. Of course, a high-end Soundstage as a separate makes a pretty decent upgrade. So the turntable and cartridge I used were really kind of price appropriate for this system, and really an external Soundstage was not necessary. But being a picky vinyl junkie, I decided I'd also hook up a Sutherland Insight to the A12 using the RCA inputs and got even better results. So an upgrade path is available for the phono section by buying a separate Soundstage, but it's not really necessary. It's a great place to start if you're looking to buy an integrated and play your vinyl. It will be a very satisfying experience. Headphones were also easily powered and sounded very good. I used a Grado HP100 SE, Mesolite, and Virum 2 headphones and they all sounded very good with the headroom amp. I had plenty of power, plenty of headroom to spare for the headphones. If you had $4,000 to spend, I would most certainly recommend the A12 to anyone. It sounds fantastic and it looks just as good as it sounds. Its versatility makes it useful for anything that you could use it for. A tape loop, hadn't even seen one of those in a long time. I mean, these guys thought of everything. With the DAC, Soundstage, and headphone section, along with the performance of the amp and its features, make this a no-brainer. We highly recommend it at $30,799. It is a steal of a deal. The one thing I didn't get to do was test a Bluetooth device in it. It's still on its way to me. We will be able to do another review of that shortly, and we'll update you on that. Anyways, the A12 is highly recommended. We think that you would be very pleased. We were very pleased with it. We were actually very surprised at how good it was. So if you're looking for that type of an integrated amp, you can't beat the Advanced Paris A12. Thank you for watching and listening.